Hello, everybody. Welcome in to the latest edition of Believe in Steelers. Day 2 of mandatory minicamp has come and gone. One more day left before the Steelers take a little bit of about a month-long hiatus and then return next month for training camp to officially kick off the 2025 NFL season. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. As always, if you're listening as a podcast, be sure to follow, especially if you're listening on Spotify, and leave a review. And if you're watching on the Believe YouTube channel or however you are watching, we appreciate you for making the show part of your day. And while mandatory minicamp continues, the biggest story or biggest rumor, biggest speculation surrounding the Steelers to come out on Wednesday was the possibility that Pittsburgh could trade for all-pro cornerback Jalen Ramsey from the Miami Dolphins. Reports also indicate that they would be intrigued in signing Jaire Alexander, who was recently released from the Green Bay Packers as well. And the speculation started from, I mean, if you're on X, if you're on Twitter, whatever, the account Ricky, who has broken several different NFL stories. The night before the George Pickens trade, he was very heavily indicating that the trade would be coming. And if you're not familiar with the account, do a quick Google search on it. It would take me a long time to explain it, and I don't even know if I would be able to explain it properly. But regardless, that's where a lot of the speculation came from this like anonymous insider who has gotten a lot more right than he has wrong. And he is now saying that the Steelers are interested in adding either Jaire Alexander or Jalen Ramsey. So let's start on the Jalen Ramsey front, because of the two, between him and Jaire Alexander, he's the one I would be more interested in the Steelers adding. They would have to trade for him, but at this point, it wouldn't take a lot to get the job done. He's a little bit older, even though he's coming off a really good season with Miami. The fact that he is on the older side, he's a little bit more expensive as well, contract-wise, because they just paid him last offseason. It won't take a lot for the Steelers to get him. A day 3 pick would probably get the job done in terms of a trade. Jaire Alexander's only played in 14 games over the last 2 years, so there's a big injury red flag. He probably wouldn't be expensive to sign, but I think the higher ceiling move would be to go out and acquire Jalen Ramsey. And some people may ask, well, where is he going to fit into the defense? You know, they signed Darius Slay. Obviously, Joey Porter is the number 1 cornerback on the defense. Where would Jalen Ramsey fit in? And there's a lot of different things they can do with Jalen Ramsey. And the Los Angeles Rams are a team that really proved that, putting him at that like star joker position where they just moved him all around, where he could play outside or in the boundary, sometimes back at safety. There's a lot of different things that you can do with a guy like Jalen Ramsey, who's incredibly gifted, incredibly talented, and would make a lot of sense for the Steelers to trade, say, a 5th-round pick, as my good buddy Derek Bell from Steelers Now projected would get the job done. It makes so much sense for Pittsburgh to do this. And I want to give credit to Derek Bell for making this reference as well, saying that if they wanted to contend, and if they're serious about contending, which it very much seems they are because of the moves they've made, trading for DK Metcalf, signing Aaron Rodgers, you know, they're serious about going all in this year. If that's the case, then the best way to do it, as Derek Bell pointed out, is to try to like 2015 Broncos it. Like, they already have a very good defense, but if they add Jalen Ramsey, we're talking about a unit who could be like a top 3 defense in the NFL so long as everybody stays healthy. And I thought that was a really good point that Derek made. Especially if you get good Aaron Rodgers, which, you know, we've talked about it plenty on this show already, so forgive me for being a little bit repetitive, but Aaron Rodgers himself last year, well, by his standards, wasn't great, but by NFL quarterback standards, was still in the upper half of NFL starters in the NFL. And so if you get solid quarterback play from Aaron Rodgers, which I believe they will, and if you can get a guy like Jalen Ramsey to plug into your defense, there's a lot of different things that they can do with him. Again, they could put him in the nickel spot because there still is question marks surrounding Beanie Bishop and potentially Brandon Eccles at that spot as well. But if Darius Slay loses a step and they want to keep him on the field, maybe bumping him inside and putting Jalen Ramsey on the outside is something that could be explored with the potential personnel that they would have after a trade like that. I wonder if they could maybe try to do like some sort of pick swap situation if they were to trade somebody like Corey Trice to Miami in return. You know, a lot of Steelers fans, myself included, really enjoy Corey Trice and, you know, think he has a lot of potential, but the injury stuff has been a big red flag for him as well. And if you have all of those guys on the roster in Joey Porter and Darius Slay, Jalen Ramsey, Brandon Eccles, you know, there's going to be guys who don't necessarily make the cut. And again, that could be what Corey Trice needs, you know, a couple veteran guys in front of him to help him along. So I'm not necessarily saying I would want them to trade Corey Trice, but if they could get a draft pick in return by sending Corey Trice and a draft pick for Jalen Ramsey and maybe, again, some sort of pick swap, maybe that's something that comes to fruition. But trading for Jalen Ramsey makes a ton of sense if you're the Steelers, just to beef up the defense as much as you possibly can. I will also point out, though, it can't be the only move they make. Like, you need to make a move for a receiver, because for as great as the defense could be, it doesn't matter if you're in a shootout and you got no bullets. And that's been a big problem for the Steelers once they get to the postseason, is you run into a Kansas City who can just run up and down the field no matter who they play. The Steelers couldn't do that. You play a Buffalo team who has Josh Allen and they're going to run up and down the field no matter who they play. The Steelers couldn't compete with that. And then they play Baltimore, who has seemed to figure out how to finally beat Pittsburgh. And they just ran up and down the field and the Steelers couldn't do it back. You need to have firepower. You can't just have defense. And that's been my biggest problem with the way that Mike Tomlin's gone about the last 5 to 10 years, is he's trying to build a roster like it's still 2008, and you can't win a Super Bowl by playing that style of football anymore. And that's been the most frustrating part of this entire drought, is just the lack of change and the lack of adjusting and the lack of evolving from Mike Tomlin. So while I'm completely on board with making a move for a guy like Jalen Ramsey, it can't be the only move that they make. They have to get on the offensive and go get another potential star receiver to put opposite of DK Metcalf on the boundary. And then they'll really be a much more dangerous team than what they currently are. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. You know, we're keeping the notifications on in terms of all the insiders and seeing if a story breaks. You know, we're recording this at about 5:30 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday. So we'll see if anything comes to be. But a move for Jalen Ramsey is something that should be welcomed by Steelers fans, because, again, showcase the ability to still be a big play guy. Let's look up his numbers real quick just so we can put, you know, facts to words here. 2 interceptions last year, 24 for his career. And again, even at, how old is he? Age 30. He'll turn 31 during the season in October. This is still a guy that's making plays, and they can move him around the defense, whether it be in the slot, on the boundary, depending on where they want to play him. They can do a bunch of different stuff with him. That would be an exciting addition, but it can't be the only one. And while they need to add a receiver, we know one guy that isn't interested in them, from his own words, and that is free agent wide receiver Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen went on a TikTok live and was asked about potentially joining the Steelers, to which he said, you know, Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback is exciting, but in terms of going to Pittsburgh, no. So he pretty much shut down any sort of conversation surrounding that. And, with Keenan Allen last year in Chicago, had a nice year. His only season with the Bears, had 70 catches and 7 touchdowns, was really instrumental in helping Caleb Williams along. And he's probably, if we look at all of the names remaining free agent wise, probably the best one. It's Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper. They brought in Gabe Davis for a visit and he left without a contract. So that tells us that he's not healthy. And Amari Cooper last year, coming off somewhat of a down year, did deal with injuries, but only had 44 catches with Cleveland and Buffalo. And when the Bills traded for him, a lot of people assumed that he would, see his production skyrocket. If anything, he was a decoy for a lot of the stuff to open things up underneath in the run game and for guys like Khalil Shakir in the pass game. And not to say that he still didn't have splash plays. I mean, in the regular season game against Kansas City, he had 2 great catches that set them up in scoring position and played a big role in that. So I don't think that Amari Cooper can't play. He's certainly not what he used to be, but when you get a receiver in his mid-30s, there's not going to be, a lot of that elite talent that used to be there. Would he be a good one-year stopgap? Probably. But if you're the Steelers, a trade there would probably make a little bit more sense as well. Who would they trade for? All the usual suspects will get floated around. But considering nothing's happened yet, I don't know. Unless a name comes out of left field that we're not really expecting. But for any sort of contending team, it wouldn't make sense to trade a guy right now. Getting a guy at the deadline would make more sense to me. We talked about that with Alan Saunders on Monday. But if you're the Steelers and going all in, you got to get somebody else, because all due respect to Calvin Austin, he can't be your number 2 boundary guy. A 5'7" wide receiver, like that can't be your plan opposite DK Metcalf. We'll see with Roman Wilson, but I don't think you can bank on Roman Wilson just coming in and being good. But they didn't put him out there last year for a reason. Obviously, he dealt with the injury in training camp and whatnot, but he wasn't ready, and they didn't feel like he was going to be able to produce. There's been reports that they reached out to New Orleans about Chris Olave, and New Orleans said that, no, that we're not interested in trading Chris Olave. So, if the worst team in football isn't willing to trade away their top weapon, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a team that is going to be willing to do that. But they got to make some sort of move. And if that means bringing in Amari Cooper, well, then at least you're better than what you currently are. And a receiving core of DK Metcalf, Amari Cooper, Robert Woods, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, you can certainly do worse than that. It's better than the room that they had last year. But that is something that they got to do. That said, if they can get Jalen Ramsey, I want to make sure that I'm being clear. Absolutely go and get Jalen Ramsey, but they do have to get another receiver. But I do love the analogy of, hey, if you can't get a ton of offensive stars, you may as well get as many defensive stars as you possibly can, and go all in on getting as many of those guys as you possibly can on the defensive side of the ball, and make life more difficult for the opposing teams. And on paper, it sounds great. TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, rookie Derek Harmon, Keanu Benton, Minkah Fitzpatrick still there, Deshaun Elliott, who played tremendous last year, Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, Jalen Ramsey on one defense, man. On paper, that is a great unit, a potentially top of the league unit. But if the offense can't score, which I don't think they're not going to be able to put up any points, but, if you're going toe-to-toe with Buffalo in the postseason, The Bills can score 30 points whenever they want. They did it 8 consecutive games last year. Buffalo can put up points on just about anybody they decide. Buffalo can score against anybody. And if you can't go toe-to-toe with that, if you can't answer every question they have, if you can't, answer a touchdown with a touchdown, then it doesn't matter what your defense can do. Because Josh Allen's going to put up points no matter who he's playing against. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, they've won 3 Super Bowls and been to 5 for a reason. They're not just going to lay down. And Cincinnati's going to be able to score. They may not be able to stop anybody, but they're going to score. I like the Steelers' odds against the Bengals much better than I do any of the other aforementioned teams because, we saw that the Steelers could go toe-to-toe with them last year with Russell Wilson when they put up over 40 in Cincinnati. So we know that they can score. But can Cincinnati stop anybody? We know that Baltimore's going to try to run the ball all over the Steelers and all over everybody. These are the things you got to think about, not just for the regular season. We know the Steelers can win regular season games. But if they want to have success in January, they got to be able to score. You can beat a Jets team with, a Jalen Ramsey trade and not many new offensive moves. You can beat a Seattle team with a Jalen Ramsey trade and not too many other offensive moves. There's a lot of teams that they can beat on their schedule without having a great offense. Come January, though, who are they going to beat without having a great offense? So they got to get another guy on that side of the ball. And even if it's, a Jonnu Smith or a Kyle Pitts where it's just basically a slot receiver, okay. You can be a little bit more versatile with Kyle Pitts because he's, a little bit bigger. You can put Jonnu Smith at a few different places on the field. So, it wouldn't be necessarily ideal, but it would be an upgrade. And it would be another guy on offense who can go get you a bucket. So I'm looking forward to seeing what unfolds over the next month or so before training camp. Because if there's a trade made, it'll be before camp. Or if there's multiple trades made for a Ramsey or a receiver, it'll be in the span before training camp. But Pittsburgh does need to make some more moves if they want to be considered in anywhere near the contenders in the AFC. And look, even with the Jalen Ramsey move and a wide receiver move, a lot of people probably are still going to count them out. Which is, whatever. They're the ones who have to play the games and prove people wrong. But if they go into the season with Calvin Austin as the number 2 boundary receiver, that's not good. So, as much as I would love to see a Jalen Ramsey trade, I would like to see a wide receiver trade more. Because it doesn't matter how good the defense is, the best teams are still going to score against it, and you got to be able to answer a touchdown with a touchdown. And if you can't do that, it's all for naught. But look forward to seeing what they end up doing as mandatory minicamp gets set to wrap up. And then Pittsburgh goes on a month-long hiatus until training camp in Latrobe, where everybody reports. Maybe we'll see a TJ Watt extension done before then. Maybe we won't. We'll see. The last time that TJ Watt missed mandatory minicamp and didn't get a deal done until training camp, he broke the NFL sack record. So, for good reason, Mike Tomlin isn't worried. The Steelers don't seem to be very worried. They want to get a deal done. I fully expect them to get a deal done. And like I've said a few times over the past couple of days, we are so close to being completely back to football. as training camp is just over a month away. And the Hall of Fame game is 50 days away, 49 days away. So less than 2 months from a real, actual, factual football game being played on television, and looking forward to walking every step of the way with you. So again, thank you guys so much for listening. If you're listening as a podcast, please be sure to leave a review, follow along on Spotify. You can give us a follow. If you're watching this, whether it be on the Believe YouTube channel or our several different respective outlets, appreciate you for making Believe in Steelers part of your day, and look forward to this season with you, following along with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So take care until our next episode. I'll talk to you very soon, right here on Believe in Steelers.